Okay, great. Welcome everyone to PSI's Inspection, Testing, Maintenance, and Training session, where we will cover a basic overview of fire sprinkler and fire alarm systems. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items. First, this training session is being recorded, and we will send you the recording to your inbox shortly after the presentation is over. And second, we welcome your questions throughout the presentation. Please submit your questions in the Q&A, and we will get those answered at the earliest opportunity. With that, let's get started. Your presenters today will be myself, Sandy. I'm an account executive out of our Sacramento office. Joining me will be Daryl, a senior account executive out of our San Francisco Bay Area office. Daryl holds several NICET certifications, including fire alarm, fire sprinkler, and special hazard suppression systems. And last but not least, Sam, an account manager from our Northern California West region. One more, Daryl. Thank you. Performance Systems Integration provides a single source service that includes system install, test and inspection, maintenance and repair, alarm monitoring, discrepancy management, and code compliance consult. The topics of our agenda today will be codes, terms and acronyms, types of sprinkler systems and how they operate, when to test sprinklers, 5-year testing, basic fire alarm detection, when to test those fire alarms, and we will conclude with a Q&A. The NFPA, known as the National Fire Protection Association, provides us with test standards that tell us how and when to test different types of fire protection systems. The ones we will be giving you a basic overview of are NFPA 25 for water-based fire protection systems and NFPA 72 for fire alarms. Some terms that you will come across regarding fire protection are AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction. They are the fire marshal or fire department in your local region that are responsible for enforcing code requirements. The AHJ can require that you provide more than what the code states, but they cannot require less. Now, inspection, testing, and maintenance service. Inspection is generally a visual examination of the system's components and may require disassembly or operation of those components to verify the proper operation. Testing is the procedure used to determine the operational status of the components, and maintenance is the work performed to keep those systems operational. Now, these services are to be provided by a qualified person at the required intervals set by the fire codes. A qualified person is an individual who has met the training and certification requirements set by the NFPA and acceptable by to the AHJ. A deficiency is when the system has a component that is not functioning properly or is missing a component that does not affect the operation of the system, but is still required by code. An example of that would be missing fire signs that indicate parts of the systems. Now, an impairment is when the system or part of the system is not functional. Different types of impairment would be emergency impairment, like unexpected event water, supply interruptions, or fused sprinkler heads. There's also planned impairments, such as pre-planned shutdowns of the system for repairs or modifications. And fire watch. Fire watch is when an individual is responsible for notifying the fire department or the occupants of the site of an emergency. This would happen if the fire alarm system or fire sprinkler system is out of service for long durations of time. And finally, repair is to fix and restore components to operational status. Now that we've covered codes and terminology, I'd like to turn it over to Daryl to cover sprinkler systems.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This section is really just going to cover the basics of components of wet sprinkler systems, standpipes, and hydrants, and kind of a general overview of what kind of inspection requirements and process and procedures for those basic inspection requirements for each one. These are the most common that you will see. So fire sprinkler riser systems. So these are basically piping components that are feeding fire sprinkler heads. So this is a water distribution center. As you see there on the left-hand side is kind of a basic riser. When you hear that terminology riser, basically it's the pipe coming in and feeding out to fire sprinkler heads. There in the middle is a different style. It's more of a residential style. Same basic components, just in a wall hatch. On the right-hand side, if you walk into most multi-story commercial buildings, this is probably what you'll see in the stairwell. This is kind of the basic riser setup for a fire sprinkler system in a commercial building. Next, we have here kind of a basic breakdown of fire sprinkler heads. They are put together and developed based on where they're going to be positioned. There on the left-hand side, you see a pendant style, which if you look up and you have fire sprinklers in your office or location now, these are the basic style you'll see coming out of the ceiling. There on the far right, these are called uprights. These are usually in attic spaces. You usually do not see these. Sometimes you may see them high up in a commercial building that has a high ceiling. Basically, these are a few other pictures of fire sprinkler heads and kind of what they look like and how they are positioned. There on the left is a pendant. There on the right is an upright. As you can see there are different styles of links on each one of them. The links is what operationally activates for the sprinkler head to actually discharge water. So that piping is pressurized at all times with water. The only thing that prevents that water from discharging at any one time is that little, on the left-hand side, you see that red bulb. On that right, you see a metal link. In the middle there, that is a concealer cover. That's in most residential and office buildings. So when you look up and you don't see a sprinkler head, you just see that disc. Right below that picture, you'll see the sprinkler head. So underneath that is a sprinkler head. That disc will drop at a certain temperature rating to expose that fire sprinkler head. Each one of these sprinkler heads, depending on its location, has a designated thermal capacity. So that means it's going to operate at a designated temperature rating. Most office buildings, you're going to see them red or green. Sometimes in a commercial setting, you will see more higher temps. So if it's an environment where there's a higher temperature rating, we definitely don't want that sprinkler head activating on normal temperatures. It's going to need to activate on higher. Some of the over and above requirements for fire sprinkler heads have to do with 20-year and 50-year testing. Basically, the sprinkler head, like we said, is set to activate at a certain temperature rating. So every 20 or 50 years, we actually have to take samples of these sprinkler heads, send them to Underwriter's laboratory, and they test them for response to verify they do activate according to the temperature rating. Some of the other components on a fire sprinkler systems, these are the basic components. So as I stated before, a fire sprinkler system takes water to operate. These are the main valves that feed into the sprinkler system. On the left there, you see a butterfly valve, post indicator valve, OS&Y, and a ball valve. Basically, these are control valves that allow water into the sprinkler system, but also allows you to isolate that sprinkler system in case of maintenance or construction that is happening. These valves are maintained at all times. As you can imagine, if these valves get closed, the fire sprinkler system is inoperable. So these are some of the items that are definitely tested during our quarterly visual inspection and during our annual inspection and test. These are some main components. Next, you have your what we call FDCs or fire department connections. If you see these outside your building, you have fire sprinklers in your building. These are mainly due to the fact that the city supplies water to your sprinkler system. If for any reason city water pressure goes down, the fire department can actually pull up their fire trucks, hook up their water truck, and manually press water into the sprinkler system, thereby activating the sprinkler system and flowing water in through the sprinkler head. These are other major components. So basically, this is visually inspected every quarter, tested annually, and this one actually has some extra requirements as a 5-year certification backflush, and we'll go over that a little bit later. Next, we have standpipes or hose connections. So basically, these are piping systems that are utilized for taking water and supplying water to fire department connections. These fire department connections are utilized by the fire department in case there is a fire. It gives them a water source for fighting the fire. So the fire department will actually hook up their hoses to these connections for obtaining water to fight any kind of fire. On the left-hand side, you'll see the most common standpipe systems that you'll see in most common commercial buildings. These will also be in the stairwells. There in the middle and on the right, these are more of a residential or horizontal standpipe system. So these are utilized. So if we have locations where are far off the street, which normally the fire department's going to get their water from a fire hydrant system, this will let them get water into a property where maybe a fire hydrant is not close by. Next, you see fire hydrants, or other terms would be a private fire service main. Most of the time, these hydrants you see are on the street or next to the walkways on a street. Those are usually always maintained by the fire department or local water jurisdiction. These pertain to if you have a large-scale property that has on-site parking. Oftentimes, these on-site parking sites, because of their expansive nature, have additional fire hydrants located throughout. You'd have to check with your local jurisdiction, but most jurisdictions require that you actually maintain these hydrants yourself. And these are actually an annual requirement that we do flushing on these hydrants. So to kind of summarize what the inspections and tests we have for fire sprinkler systems, we have quarterly items, annual items, whether it be for inspections or testing items that are done during an annual basis. And this gives you kind of a breakdown of generally what's done during quarterlies and annual inspections and tests. Another item to here in California, and it's actually required throughout the United States, but especially here in California, it's strongly enforced, is the 5-year inspection and test requirements. Basically, the 5-year is an additional scope of work that's done every 5th year. So this is actually performed in addition to all the annual and quarterly inspection items that we do. Every 5th year, we have to do some extra items as required by NFPA 25 and our local fire jurisdictions. A lot of this has to do with breaking down fire sprinkler components and doing internal inspections. Here you'll see some of the items that we actually do to break down. So we actually drain the sprinkler system down and do a visual inspection inside piping. We're checking for anything from corrosion to any kind of mechanical restrictions. In addition, every 5th year, we are also looking at fire sprinkler heads that are in accessible concealed spaces. As I mentioned before when I was showing you the fire sprinkler heads, most of them, as you look up, you can see. If it's a combustible space, as you can see there on the right-hand side above a drop tile ceiling, or the left-hand side is above a residential room setting, there are sprinkler heads up there. We're required per code to look at those every 5th year. So if there's a hatch or any way accessible to take a look at those, we're required to do a visual inspection on those every 5 years. These are some of the items that we find during an internal valve inspection. So as we showed you on that first picture, some of the valve components. There on the left, you can see it's a pretty clean valve, not a lot of blockage. There on the right, on the top, these are some actual items of what we've found inside fire sprinkler piping. So now you can imagine if that fire sprinkler system does activate, that can clog sprinkler heads or prevent that valve from opening completely. There at the bottom right, that's a clean valve. So that little piece actually opens up as water starts to flow through the system. So if there's significant corrosion or mechanical damage, water will not flow through the system. So that's what we look at every 5th year. Next items you see here, this is some of our internal pipe inspections that we do during the 5-year. These are actually pictures of pipes we've pulled. You can see on that top picture that half the circumference of that pipe is actually corroded and clogged. So not only is that going to be pushed into sprinkler heads and clogged sprinkler heads, but it's also going to prevent the required amount of water to flow through the system. So we need to verify that is clear of debris, clear of corrosion, and if not, come up with a remediation plan. Sometimes it's actually replacing section of piping. Sometimes it's just flushing. These are going back to that fire department connection I showed some in the earlier. You can see there on the left, water actually flowing out of it. So basically, these are utilized, like I said, is to pressurize the system by a fire truck if city water pressure goes down. So as you can imagine, if there's any debris in these fire department connections, they actually can push debris into the sprinkler system. So every 5th year, we're required to drain down the system and backflush these to verify they're clear of corrosion. So if the fire department does utilize them, we know they're clean and water will transfer properly into the fire sprinkler system without blockage. Another last item we'll do on sprinkler systems is these calibrations of gauges or replacement. So these are gauges we utilize throughout the year for pressure testing to verify our water pressure is correct for providing pressure to our fire sprinkler heads as designed. Every 5th year, we need to check these for calibration. So it's either we remove and install a calibrated pressure gauge and verify we're within 3%, or replace them. A lot of times it's more practical to get them replaced every 5th year, depending on the number of gauges you have on your system. So that kind of clears what we do during a 5-year on the sprinkler system. A standpipe system also has some additional requirements every 5th year. So as I said before, these standpipe systems are utilized by the fire department to verify that if they need water at a remote location, this is where they hook their hoses up to actually obtain water. Any standpipe system requires a certain amount of pressure to be able to supply the necessary water to hoses. So what we do every 5th year on these standpipe systems is we actually bring out a fire truck and we actually pressurize and flow water as the fire department would do it. So pretty much we're testing this standpipe every 5 years, besides the annual inspection and quarterly. Every 5th year, we're going to test it like the fire department will use it. So we're going to pressurize it and flow water. That kind of gives you a basic summary of the fire sprinkler, fire standpipe, mechanical, and also kind of some basic test. Sam is going to take it from here and give you a little information about fire alarms.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'll be diving into the basic component of the fire alarm system, how does the fire alarm system works, as well as the frequency of test and inspection. The main component of the fire alarm system is the control panel, which is powered by the primary power supply. And by law, it required to have a backup battery in case we lose power. The backup battery will trigger it and will ensure that the system keep functioning. The control panel is connected to 2 types of devices. There is a detection device that detects fire, and then there is a notification device that alerts the tenant in case of fire. It's also connected to the communicator, which is connected with the central station. So the detection devices, and they called also initiating devices, and they are either manual or automatic. These are consider the input information to the fire panel, and then the output information go through the indicating appliances or the notification like a horn or strobe. In the event of fire, also the control panel will recall the elevator, as well as block the smoke by closing the fire door, and then trigger the smoke detector in the HVAC system to prevent the smoke from spreading. So the operation started with the initiating devices, and as I mentioned, there is some electronic like a heat detector, smoke detector, flame detector. There is also some component of the fire alarm that are related to the sprinkler system, like the water flow and the tamper switch. So in case the sprinkler goes off in a fire, the water flow will detect that and notify um, the control panel to do its work. Also, there is a manual like the pull station, and it has a different styles. It depends the requirement or the environment. As you see here in the pictures, there is 5 type: the single action, the dual action, the key operated, the waterproof, and the explosion proof. The electronic devices also are different devices. There is a smoke, heat detector, or they can be a combination of both smoke and heat detector together. And there is different types. Also, it depends the requirement or the environments. So once the fire alarm panel receive that information from the initiating devices, it will notify the tenant through the notification devices, and they are horn, you will hear noises, or the strobe, you'll see the lights. So basically that's the how the system works and the components that it's related to the system. To keep the system functioning the way it should, the NFPA 72 require 2 type of inspections. The semi-annual inspection, which requires a visual inspection. So basically, we go to the site, we look at the system, we check the devices. There is nothing broken. There is no debris. We check the backup battery. We make sure that it's in a good health and it will function when we need it. And we do overall visual inspection. The annual inspection, it's a little bit more involved. We basically check the system and test it like there is fire going on. So for instance, we introduce smoke to the smoke detector and make sure that the smoke works and send the signals to the fire panel, and that triggers the alarm. We pull station, for example. We pull the station and make sure once we do the action of pulling the station, it will send the signal to the fire alarm, and then it will trigger the alarm. So basically we go a little bit deeper and making sure that the system functions the way it should in the case of fire. And that gives us overview about the fire alarm system and the frequency of the test. I hope this session provide you with a little bit of more understanding on how the system work and the frequency of the testing. And with that, I'm going to give the mic back to Daryl.
Thank you, Sam. Kind of in summary, one thing to kind of mention, if you guys, as we go through this, the requirements we have for fire alarm system, the requirements we have for fire sprinkler systems. When we do test and inspect, we're a consolidated vendor, so we're licensed by the state of California to do both fire alarm inspections and fire sprinkler inspections. When you test and inspect one, you're kind of partially testing and inspecting the other one. So when we're doing visual and we're doing operational tests, say doing water flows on a sprinkler system, we're also verifying that that water flow activates the alarm system. So thereby, we're satisfying the NFPA 25 code as part of a sprinkler inspection, but we're also satisfying the NFPA 72 code as part of fire alarm. You need to be licensed by the state of California to do both. So if a contractor's doing your fire sprinkler inspections and they're doing the water flow and the valve tampers as part of their sprinkler test, it doesn't satisfy your fire alarm test unless they're licensed in both. So that's something to consider when you're choosing your vendors out there, is that especially when you're doing residential. When we're going into units, we got to look at sprinkler heads once a year as part of sprinkler inspections. We also got to test horns inside units once a year. So if you're doing those together, then we're going in there one time and satisfying both requirements, NFPA 25 and NFPA 72. And at that's kind of the end of our presentation. I want to see if there's any questions. I didn't see any questions there coming through. There was a couple, but let's see. Somebody was asking about other requirements for NFPA 25 and 72. Are there others? One item to consider, I would say, is your insurance provider. So whoever provides your insurance for your property, it covers your, say you have a residential or commercial setting, to check with your insurance provider. Most likely there is a line in there that has something to do with maintain your fire systems according to code, which would be NFPA 25 and 72 for fire alarm and fire sprinkler. So definitely check with your insurance provider. Another question was, somebody asked, can you test your fire system? As Sandy had stated before, the state of California and other jurisdictions, whether it be the Northwest or California, requires specific licensing for whether it be a fire sprinkler technician, a fire alarm technician, and then also the general reference, if you want to look for the state of California, is for a vendor to do testing on a fire alarm system. The license, contractor's license, is a C10. For testing on a fire sprinkler system, the license requirement for the state of California is C16. State of California also has some specific requirements for an electrical technician, which would be fire alarm, and for a sprinkler technician as well, similar to the fire alarm technician. They're all requirements for what we talked today about, mainly quarterly, annual, and 5-year. NFPA does require some specific things monthly and daily. We can advise you on that. That doesn't require licensing, and that's just a matter of doing a visual walk throughout the property. So that's kind of all the questions we had. As we stated before, this session's being recorded. So if you would like to review this webinar again, this training session, you can visit our website listed here to resources. There'll be a copy of this training and also many other trainings we've done previously. So no cost. You can take those trainings at any time, as many times as you like. You could forward that on to any coworkers or any people you want to refer as far as training to. And I want to thank everybody again for taking the time out of their day to spend some time with us. A little bit about basics. You could submit any questions to our website as well. Like we said before, we're a one-stop shop fire service provider. So alarm, sprinkler, extinguishers, emergency exit lighting, fire alarm monitoring. We do one-stop shop approach to fire services. So everything is in-house. Nothing is subcontracted. You can hit our website and request any kind of consultation or proposal request. There's no cost for it. So I want to thank again everybody for their day, for their time, and everybody have a great holiday. Thank you.